And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, September 1st. We are in a new month. And as always, follow us on Facebook at Lubbock Compact or go to lubbockcompact.com to follow our work. I am your host, Adam Hernandez, here with my co-host, Dr. Nick Bergfeld. And we don't have much in the way of updates in the news, but we do have some COVID numbers, right?
Yeah, so this week, really the big thing for Lubbock was that Texas Tech is back in session. Same with LISD. So we're really starting to see an increase, I think, overall, just simply in activity in the community. And when activity is going up, so are the COVID numbers. Today, actually, we have some of the highest numbers that we've had since one of our peaks, one of the darkest times in our history within COVID. And it looks like we're on a current trajectory to hit 500 cases daily sometime next week. And one thing to point out, so the Texas Tech football game is on Saturday. A lot of folks super excited about this, tons of local energy, especially because of the controversies around the Big 12 and UT leaving it. There's a lot of excitement coming into this because we have a veteran team that's coming back, a lot of same players coming back onto the field for this year. So I know there's a lot of excitement in this, and please, if you can, get vaccinated. This event, there's going to be a lot of people there, a lot of great energy, but we have to understand that we're about to potentially start hitting some of the bleakest numbers that we've had as a community during the COVID crisis. And so this is completely preventable. Both the city of Lubbock as well as our hospital systems are publishing the numbers of individuals that are hospitalized either with the vaccine or without. And the difference is enormous. It is an order of magnitude larger. Individuals that have been vaccinated, in terms of how many of them have been hospitalized, it is in the single digits percentages wise and of the overall total number of people that are currently pushing our hospitals to maximum occupancy right now. And on top of that, none of the individuals that have been vaccinated are currently utilizing a respirator or in the ICU, is my understanding. There is a big difference. So please consider to get vaccinated. Also, we are coming into flu season. Understand that as well. These you do not want to get the flu right now as well, because you don't want to end up having to use the healthcare system while there's so many people already overtaxing it. There will be situations where you potentially could not get care as a result of that. So early September, one of the best times to get the flu vaccine for the season. We're coming into that now. So please, if you've already gotten the COVID vaccine, remember that the flu vaccine is also very important. And so we'll get that as well. And this is very important just for the city of Lubbock overall. These vaccines work. They will keep you safe. They will keep you healthy. They will keep you out of the hospital. But on top of that, it will keep Lubbock's economy healthy as well. And that's also something that's very important. There are a lot of people within our community that are not going about their daily lives because our numbers are so high, because they're concerned, because they are infirm or they have a pre-existing medical condition. And so what's happening is we're not getting the same kind of boost. We're not getting the same kind of economic output as we normally would. Because even if you feel comfortable not being vaccinated and being out in public, there are many, many people in our community who are not, and that is having a big impact on the overall success of our economy and our community. So please keep these things in mind. It's exciting that Texas Tech is back in session. It's exciting that the school year is coming back, but we really need to be mindful of these things as a community to make sure that we are able to stay out ahead of this and that we don't go into the darker times like we have previously had with COVID. So that's really sort of what's been happening within the city of Lubbock over this past week. There's a lot of things that have been happening in Austin, a lot of things that have been happening nationally. But for us here in Lubbock, one of the biggest topics that isn't getting discussed nearly as much as it should, that we've been advocating on, is related to the Unified Development Code. And so we're going to spend today's session just simply talking about a town hall event that we were able to attend, as well as a subsequent multi-committee plus city council joint meeting that occurred subsequently after that to discuss the Unified Development Code.
Yeah, And as always, I know this is kind of one of those wonky subjects that we're going into.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions or if you need clarification on something, we are watching the comments on Facebook. So don't hesitate to put your questions and comments in there, and we will be able to see them throughout the show. Just wanted to remind everybody about that. And so last Wednesday was the open house. Was that right?
Yep. Yeah. And so, as a refresher here, the Unified Development Code consolidates many, many different documents the city of Lubbock has. We have not done comprehensive zoning reform in something like 40, 50 years. So this is a very big deal. This document has been rolling out to the community in a segmented fashion that they've been calling modules. And so the most recent conversations that we've been having is module 4. And module 4 is all about rules and regulations. So it talks about who in the city government, say that the planning director has power over changing zoning on case-by-case bases and how that dispute settlement process works. But importantly for us, it was also about what are called non-conforming uses. And Adam, you were able to be present for both of these, both the open house as well as the subsequent council meeting. Let's talk about the open house first, because the consultants were directly communicating for one of the few times that as a citizen you've been able to interact with the consultants, the people who are writing this code. This was one of the first opportunities for many citizens to actually have a conversation with them.
Yeah, and just a reminder for everybody, or for those who may be tuning in for the first time and don't know, zoning in a city has to do with how land is used, how communities are built, if you want to call it that. So, houses shouldn't be near industrial sites, for instance, or polluting places, for instance. And that's kind of one of the things where we are stepping in and have been stepping in since Lubbock Compact began. In North and East Lubbock, historical North and East Lubbock, inside the loop, these communities, largely Black and brown communities, have been subjected to heavy industry right up against their neighborhoods. And so this is an issue. It's not only an eyesore, it's actually an environmental health issue. And why we say that is because that's just the fact of it. And so these sites release very small particles into the air. Some of these are concrete batch plants. Some of these are cotton oil plants. So they do different things, but all of these plants release little particles, tiny particles into the air. That's why a lot of folks who work at these places wear masks most of the day. And so, as you can imagine, folks who are living right next to these have health issues because of that. And some of the health issues that are very common in these areas, such as asthma, high blood pressure, diabetes, and the list goes on. These are all very common in those areas. And it's just not a coincidence that it's happening when they're right up against these sites. And so this is a very important issue. The other part of this, besides the all-important public health issue that it is also the economic impact that it has, not only on those communities, but as a result on the city. So the city is not even getting the tax revenue or the property tax revenue that it could be getting because of these industries sitting there. Nobody's going to build new businesses and new houses next to these places where there's already industry. And so it's just creating a whole lot of different problems for our city. It is a big mess of an issue to deal with, but it needs to be dealt with nonetheless. And so that's the setup to where we were going into this open house, which was about the non-conforming uses. And non-conforming uses is basically when a city updates their zoning, as happens from time to time, some use that was legal before may now be illegal. And so what do you do then in that instance? And that's what this non-conforming use is about, because if they change the rules, now that place would be non-conforming according to the city, and then so something would need to be done, right? And so in the instance of these heavy industries, there is a tool that cities can use called amortization, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But we have been advocating for amortization since literally last summer. And actually, there was a group advocating for this for about 2 years before Lubbock Compact even came on the scene. And so this is not anything new to the council. It's not anything new to city staff. And so how we were dealing with that, or how we were trying to address that, was going to deal with a committee called the CPOC Committee, CPOC, which stands for Comprehensive Plan Oversight Committee. And the comprehensive plan is the same thing as the land use plan. It's the same thing. So they are an oversight committee. They're supposed to see that the land use plan that was adopted in 2018 gets carried out how it was supposed to. The issue we've been running into is that the city has been picking and choosing what they want to get out of there. Though all of the recommendations are made with the implication that they need to be carried out, none of them say, oh, you can do this or not. They're all these recommendations are said, this is what Lubbock should do in order to move forward. But yet and still, the city is choosing to pick and choose which they do. And so the industrial areas is heavily in Plan Lubbock 2040. It's mentioned many times that it's a problem, that it needs to be addressed. Amortization is a way to address that. We've been trying to get that into the committee. The committee has been on our side, which is just on the side of the people. You know, it's not just us, Lubbock Compact. We are actually advocating for those neighborhoods, and we've had people from those neighborhoods go and make comments. And so the committee, the CPOC committee, is absolutely committed to doing the role that they were asked to carry out. And what has happened, judging off of this open house, is that all the recommendations and all the requests for information and all these different things that the committee has asked of city staff, not one of them has reached the consultants. Yeah. And the consultants have been working on this. I don't even remember. How long have they been working on this?
About a year now. So their contract got extended beyond the original year that they were supposed to. And this, to me, I think, was really the standout part from the open house. Was, as a citizen, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to directly interface with the consultants. And so when they were here, we did have the opportunity to ask them about the process, how one of them felt about amortization, but then also more specifically from a process standpoint, what were their views of the requests that the CPOC, the Comprehensive Plan Oversight Committee, had been making to them. And I think the unfortunate part was the consultant didn't seem to know what that committee was, and definitely did not know of any requests for information or feedback that committee had made. And it's unfortunate because, and we'll go into this when you talk about the public comment you gave the next day, it's unfortunate because when Lubbock originally sent out a request for consultants to do this process, what we as a city said we were going to pay for did involve some of these conversations and some of these issues because they were brought up in the 2040 plan. And so for the oversight committee that's supposed to be making sure that we are following through with our commitments in this land use plan. And I will say that this land use plan did change industrial zoning. It just happened to change it in Southwest Lubbock. There was a parcel of industrial zoning near the Marcia Sharp and the Loop, and that actually was gotten rid of. And hotels are being built there and sort of stuff like that. But that's to say, is the city is more than capable of removing industrial sites from the land use map, and we have done that as a city. And so I think that was probably one of the big things from the open house that I took home was it felt as though the people in our community that have been tasked with, and this is their civic duty by being on this committee, tasked with making sure that we're doing right by our commitments, have not even had the opportunity to follow through on that. And on top of that, they haven't been told that this is what's been going on. They've been doing these and making these requests for months now, believing that this was actually reaching the consultants, believing that this information and their requests were going somewhere. And it turns out this entire time, somewhere within the hierarchy of the city planning department, this has just been absolutely shut down.
Yeah, very, very disappointing. I will say, unfortunately, though, as has been my experience since being involved with political processes since last year, at the end of the day, not surprising. And that's what's unfortunate. I got to admit, though, I did not see this one coming. I didn't see the city literally ignoring the committee.
A citizen committee, yeah.
Not only ignoring them, for the folks out there listening, they were actively undermining the work of that committee.
Yeah.
So, this is another level from what even I've seen, being involved in so much of this stuff.
And it makes the talking point, how frequently have we heard when we speak up or out about these issues that we're told, well, the appropriate way to do something about this is to join a committee, apply for the city's committees, put your name in for a committee. Not enough people are applying for committees. If you were on one, see, it's your fault for not applying. And because there's not enough people on these committees, this is the reasons why these things happen. And I can't help but reflect upon that talking point and think about, for the citizens that took this civic duty, where they attended City Hall and they said that they were going to faithfully enact their the policies of the city, that they were faithfully going to do those roles on the committee, and the city council votes them in to be committee members. What does that process mean if we've reached a stage where the city doesn't even want to honor the process?
Yeah.
When, and how as a citizen can you feel as though that any of this is designed to create good policy, right? How can good policy be an outcome of these processes, which is what they are for? Committees are for making choices, tough choices, by getting information and making essentially an informed decision about what's right for our community. And if those committees are not even allowed to receive information, they were not even at the stage of recommending amortization. That's not even where they were at. Yeah. They have been requesting for months just information. What is amortization? Have other cities in Texas done this? Mm-hmm. What is the process that we would do if we were to adopt this? Is it even possible? Are the kinds of questions that they have been asking. And in some ways, Adam, you've been filling in the gap in these conversations by providing this information to the committee when the city planning department has refused. But that's not the role of citizens in this process. We're not supposed to be the ones who are essentially trying to find good policy and saying, let's do this, right? That is the role of our policymakers, or it should be, that this is the types of things that they should be involved in. And so it just makes me reflect on that, the committee process, the committees themselves, and how the city council views individuals on them, and the value of the recommendations, considering that these are people who spend a lot of time out of their days, oftentimes rescheduling work or things like that to be a part of this process. And just, is that being honored by the council?
Yeah. And that's actually a great segue into a question we got on Facebook from Kay Marie. She says, how were they undermining? What makes their actions different now? And so Nick touched on that just a little bit. But what was going on here in this committee, when we started to bring up amortization in a more assertive way, I should say, at the beginning of this year, it first started with us kind of educating the committee on what amortization was, that this was even a thing. A couple of them knew of it, I think Dan Wilson may have known of it because he's a developer, but for the most part, they didn't know anything about it. And so we brought them that information. The committee specifically asked city staff in that meeting, what does that process look like? And if you don't know, can you get with the departments who may know, whether that be legal or whatever department you may need to get with? Because Dan Wilson, again, who's a developer who's on this committee, had already been talking kind of behind the scenes with some of, people he knew to ask if this was, is this a thing? Can this be done? Is it legal? Kind of what are some of the pitfalls, whatever. And so he had got the information back. which he relayed to the city staff, that legal may need to be involved. So he said, if you guys need to get with legal or whoever you need to get to, can you guys do that and bring us the information back? City staff, matter of fact, Brian Isham, the planning director, said, yes, we can bring you that back. John Swiker, who's the chair of this committee, then said to Brian, he said, well, a lot of times when the committees ask for stuff, or if the citizens ask for stuff, y'all act like there's a problem with doing that. Do you have a problem with doing this? And he just asked him directly. And Brian said, no, there's no problem. Fast forward to the next meeting, a month later, 1 month later, the next meeting, no information was brought by city staff. None, not one thing. They didn't even acknowledge it. They created the agenda and went on about their business as if the committee itself didn't exist. That we're just going to tell you what we're going to tell you, which again makes this whole situation ironic, because they're literally in all of these meetings showing them different parts of the UDC, right? So you obviously want them in on this process, but then like you said, when come to find out, the consultants they don't even know about this committee, which in and of itself is ridiculous. So that happened. So then it became a discussion in that meeting of, where are some different places they have done this. So once again, Lubbock Compact gets the information from, it's not just us. There's lots of folks helping us with this, and they know who they are. So very grateful to them. But we go and get the information and bring it back. And it was this over and over and over again. And again, actively undermining, because city staff was straight up refusing to bring them this information. They weren't saying verbally, we're not going to bring you this information, but they were saying with their actions, screw what you just said, we're not bringing you anything. And that's what happened till right up until this open house. And so, so that's how they were actively undermining it. And
it's, because we're about to transition to talking about the city council meeting after this open house. And I'll just say, I think one thing as an observer is to contrast the difficulty of the city committee, right? An official sanctioned city committee created to oversee, right? They have oversight in their name, the implementation of the 2040 plan. What does that mean? There is a matrix, there is essentially a timeline, a calendar of action items that the city agreed to in 2018 that they would implement over time. And this committee is supposed to be part of that process to ensure that we are keeping on time with those commitments, because some of those commitments, we came to the realization through these conversations as a city that some of these commitments are long overdue. When it comes to the challenges for racially motivated industrial site land use policy in the city, and that there has to be a reckoning with our past in that way. And I think about this committee, an official sanctioned citizen committee with the civic duty to make sure that this process is being done right. And I contrast that with the interfacing and interactions that the Developers Council has been able to have with the consultants. So the citizen committee has never been allowed to interact with or have a conversation or actually have a personal presentation for their committee from the consultants. And then at the public hearing component of the meeting that we'll talk about, the representative of the Developers Council was effusive in how frequently, often, and closely working together they were able to work with the consultants on everything. And they were incredibly complimentary about the process, almost to the point of boasting about how easy it was for them to interface with and influence and alter the decision-making of the consultants. And, as a citizen, I think it should be the opposite. I think the citizen committees should be the ones that have the best access, should be the ones that are interfacing and having those conversations and that dialogue with experts within those fields so that they can have an understanding of what's good for all of us. And I think the Developers Council should be involved, absolutely. But how this process has developed, to me, as a citizen and somebody who wants for and advocates for good policy, a lot of this didn't make sense.
Yeah, no, it didn't. And it continues to not make sense. And yeah, I mean, it's just blatant. It's just very blatant, which is why I made the comment I made the very next day at the city council meeting, because there was only 2 council members at the open house. But another thing that besides amortization, there was some other things that the committee was asking for information on and asking things to be relayed to the consultants, and that was regarding the more historic neighborhoods, East Lubbock, North Lubbock, Central Lubbock, inside the loop, because there is upwards of almost 90 pages about downtown in the UDC, and there's nothing in particular about any of those other older neighborhoods. And again, this is another recommendation in Plan Lubbock 2040 mentioned throughout the document. And just for those of you who don't know, Plan Lubbock 2040 is over 200 pages, maybe about 300 pages. I mean, there's quite a bit of it dedicated to this industrial issue, also dedicated to the other issues faced by these historic neighborhoods. And so, like we said earlier, the request for qualifications that the city actually sent out when they were looking for these consultants said, we need you to do Plan Lubbock 2040, because basically Plan Lubbock 2040 is the all important thing here. They replied back, said, yes, we can definitely do it. We've literally done exactly things like that are in your Plan Lubbock 2040 in other cities. So for instance, this same consulting group, and by the way, this is a great consulting group. This is not to bag on the consulting group, because they actually have a long, great resume. They won out the bid for a reason, but in their response to the city, they actually said, like in El Paso, for instance, they went down to the city block in a neighborhood with different, things in their UDC. And so it's not that they can't do it. It's that they're being stopped from doing it, or they're not being asked to do it. And so we do have another question from Kay Marie. She says, while this is still in committee, what can we as citizens do to support the committee and make our voices heard about no more industrial zoning near residents? So the next meeting for the UDC, they generally meet, or they were generally meeting the first Monday of every month, but that's kind of been thrown off a little bit. They just had this special meeting last Thursday. And so it's going to be about a month before they have another meeting. We will definitely be putting that information out. So please stay tuned, because we are going to be trying to mobilize a lot of folks, as many as possible, to attend the rest of this process and have our voices heard on this. Or even if you just want to sit to be there for more moral support. And so, yeah, there's still a little ways to go, and we still have opportunities to do that.
Yeah, and with that, engagement is very, very important on this, especially because there really is only one city council member who has shown their hand when it comes to amortization, and that is the mayor. And he has said that his arguments are either are between he doesn't believe that it's the role of a city to impinge upon private property rights, or his other argument is that he says he hasn't found examples where amortization works well.
Yet he can't name one.
Yeah. So those are the two talking points that at least one city council member has said openly. It's actually been hard to get the other council members to publicly get on the record or talk about this, even in this discussion that they had after Adam gave public comment, as well as the Lubbock Compact's Joshua Shankles, and we'll talk about that now. We still were not able to get acknowledgement from most of the council members on amortization. And so I'll start by just mentioning, so Joshua Shankles gave public comment, and he laid out some really good points about the challenges on this issue. And one that I just simply want to point out for everybody is he mentioned a number of how much of our tax base are industrial sites in our community. And they represent, it's about 0.8% of Lubbock's tax base are industrial sites. So if tomorrow every industrial site in the city of Lubbock was gone, right? From the land value standpoint, how much property taxes we would lose, it would be 0.8%. And so that actually is less than the growth of the city of Lubbock's total revenues from the housing expansion that we had in this past year. It is an absolute nothing in terms of the city's budget and what it represents to our overall revenues. And so industrial activity in Lubbock overall does not add much to our economy. It's not a large employer of individuals. It's not a large contributor to our economy. In fact, most of the industrial activity that happens in Lubbock is predominantly dirty industries, ones that have to register with the EPA as being toxic release sites, where they essentially are allowed to release a certain amount of known volatile and harmful chemicals into the air. And so Josh really made a strong point about why are we valuing these so strongly. He also read off a list, which was quite long, of many of the cities in the state of Texas that have amortization as part of their policies. And it's major cities and small cities as well, like Grapevine, Midland as well being on that list, Dallas being on that list. And just as one point, as an example, there were terrible lead smelters in Dallas where the city of Dallas used an amortization process to remove them. So if you want one example of amortization working, you can just simply Google Dallas amortization lead smelting and find a great example of how citizens organized around that and were ultimately able to get rid of these toxic facilities from their communities. And so really appreciative of Josh's comments during this. I thought they added a lot of color to the conversation. And Adam, you also gave a public comment for this and also submitted materials to the city council to substantiate the things that you were talking about. And so if you just want to chat about some of this.
Yeah, so I handed them a packet that was pretty thick. It was a decent thickness. And really all it was the relevant pages from the request for qualifications that the city sent out, that the mayor signs, that specifically reference the whole Plan Lubbock 2040 thing, the importance of using it, that basically Plan Lubbock 2040, and it didn't say this, I'm paraphrasing, it didn't say this word for word, I'm just paraphrasing it, that basically Plan Lubbock 2040 is like the backbone of the work that was to be done, is the gist of what it was saying. It was about 3 or 4 pages of that. It was next in there was all of and probably the thickest part of this thing was all of the references from Plan Lubbock 2040 printed out for them to see. And I can't even remember how many pages that was. Quite a bit of pages. So that they could see that it is, all of the references to the industrial sites, why they need to go. Same thing we did for impact fees, if anybody remembers that whole fun thing, because the impact fee situation was also tied to Plan Lubbock 2040. And then I also in this packet had the spreadsheet that we have, literal spreadsheet of the cities that Josh listed off, including the language, the literal language of what their amortization ordinances say.
Wow.
And so they have all of that now. So they can't say, where are they doing this? Or I haven't seen anywhere where they're doing it, which is, again, just a smokescreen because the mayor himself cannot name you one city without looking at that Excel spreadsheet where they have done this, because he has not looked into it. That's what we're trying to get across to you guys. He's not looked into it. It's a bunch of smoke that they're just blowing. And so I basically, told them that we've been talking about this for a really long time, and let them know that we understood that the consultants had not been told about these things. I also told them that I felt like them and city staff, meaning the council and city staff, owe the CPOC committee an apology, because and I'll say why I said that. I didn't go into this much detail at the podium, but the reason why I said that is because just like Nick just said, these folks take this very seriously. The folks on this committee, and I didn't know all of them. I knew several of them before I had even attended one of these meetings, but even the ones that I got to know more about through these meetings, I can tell you that they are genuinely desiring to do the job that they were set out to do. They take it very seriously. They sympathize, and some of them empathize with the neighborhoods, because the ones who sympathize actually live in those neighborhoods that are actually on this committee. And then the others empathize with us all who have been dealing with this, including Dan Wilson, who's a developer. So it's not an anti-developer thing or developers against the community here. And so they really wanted to do this. They come in, they take whatever time they have to take away from their families and other obligations that they have going on to make sure that they're at these meetings, to make sure that they're asking questions about the information, that not only about the information we present to them, but also the information the city presents to them. They really were putting in work around this. And you're basically playing with these people. You're basically wasting their time, because it was, I mean, there's nothing else you can call it at this point but a charade.
Yeah.
It was a charade.
Yeah.
You got up there, you showed them all these papers really fast, which makes it make a lot more sense, because one of the reason why we started bringing the information to these folks was they were actually complaining that the city was not giving them the information. Right. They were flying through this material, not giving them the information. And so they were kind of clueless. And so once we started giving them the information, they had a little better grasp of it. And again, you're playing with these folks' energy. You're playing with their time. And for what? We don't know. That was what I told them. One of the things I told them is that I felt that they needed to apologize to them. I doubt that's going to happen, which is, unfortunate. I mean, to me, if you're blocking it for whatever reason you're blocking it, fine. But those folks are not involved in that.
Right.
And so to me, that's only the right thing. You could at least say, I'm sorry, we have something else we're doing.
Right.
Or whatever, but they do deserve an apology. The other thing I asked, or the other thing was a question I asked, and just asking them directly, as I have in this committee, who is making the call to do this? Because it's clearly not a problem with the consultants. The consultants are capable. The consultants have done this kind of thing before. Now, the consultant did say that he, and to his knowledge, his company has never done an amortization clause. All right, fine. But they go in UDCs, and all these spreadsheets of the city, they go in the UDC. So that part aside, so somebody is making the call somewhere along the way, and we don't know who it is.
Right.
So there's no way that we can tell you, oh, we think it's this person, or we think it's the council, or we think, because everybody is remaining tight-lipped on this. Nobody is saying anything about it. Of course, I actually didn't get to stick around for the response to this question or anything else they said. But the last thing I said in my comment that I knew was going to fall on deaf ears as well was, if they really want to put this to the test, as far as, go outside of their own experience and their own thoughts about it to get other folks' thoughts about it, they could put this on the ballot in November. Right. So this ballot in November is the one where the bond proposal is going on. Also, another item that's going to be on there for folks to vote on is the tax increase for the county for the sheriffs. And so those two things have been in the news. There's other things on there, but those two things a lot of folks might already know about. But you can have this on there.
Yep.
And you can actually do what's called a non-binding referendum, which they actually had brought up about the city council pay. And this situation actually, would be okay to take a little more time on it. If you wanted to do a non-binding referendum, which for those of y'all who missed that, is basically, it's like a poll on a ballot, right? So they could put it on the ballot and say, do you want this thing? Yes or no. But let's say everybody votes and they say, yes, we want this thing. It's non-binding, meaning the city won't make it into a law. They'll just have that information to say, okay, this amount of people were for it. Yeah. Right. But they would need to wait a period of time after that to get it all enacted. But as per the usual with this council, and it's not all of them, but the majority of the council seems very uninterested in hearing public input.
Right. And a non-binding referendum, so if a election is already going to happen, so long as the non-binding referendum component isn't the reason why an election is happening, it's effectively free. It's just adding an additional question onto what we would be voting on anyway. And it is a powerful way of getting feedback from Lubbock voters about what they will and won't tolerate. And we do this in different ways. Sometimes we'll do them in binding referendums, which would be, say, a bond election, which is what we're about to do. Citizens will have the option of doing a yes or no vote on about $174 million bond package for road construction across the city of Lubbock, as well as about 40 some odd million of that being specifically for downtown. So we have this ability. We as a community have the ability to ask the citizens of our community, what is it that makes sense to you? And what I will say from a best practices standpoint, are there some guiding ways to think about how your unified development code, how you zone and code a modern city? And one of the big things that we know is that a city like Lubbock, and this isn't unique to us, is overzoned. That some of the choices we've made when it comes to separating residential activity from economic activity don't make sense. And for a lot of folks who grew up in the eastern and northern parts of the city, they remember a healthier time in their communities when businesses and shops were able to be adjacent to their houses, not when they were industrial sites, but when a grocery store or a pharmacy or even a movie theater, for that matter, was allowed to coexist within a neighborhood. And one of the challenges that we experience here in Lubbock, but also happen across the United States, is that when urban renewal programs came into existence that promised to build new houses for communities, in exchange, you had to get rid of the way that your neighborhoods used to be built. You essentially had to be built from a new template, this kind of suburban sprawl, post-World War II template where it's these large plots with houses on them, just one after another, single-family home zoning with nothing else. And what we now know from a best practices standpoint is those neighborhoods struggle. They struggle to maintain a sense of identity. They struggle to maintain generational continuity between one generation to the next. So a father or mother giving their property to their daughter or son. They struggle with being able to maintain that. And in the long run, they struggle to raise the property taxes necessary to maintain services like roads, good roads in their community. They struggle to maintain the amount of property tax revenue necessary for that type of maintenance. And Lubbock, where we have gotten to at this point, is rather than use those dollars to help with road maintenance in the older neighborhoods that have needed it for years, and recognize that they're already not able to sustain themselves as they currently are, we've taken those dollars over time and invested them in other parts of our community. And so there's a lot that is related to zoning. There's a lot that can be done. In fact, from a property tax standpoint, zoning reform and allowing for these types of things to go back to the way that they were is one of the most inexpensive ways our city council could immediately raise the property tax values in the city. And I mean property tax revenue, not values in terms of raising property taxes, but just simply everything would be more desirable. The quality of life would improve. And with those things would also come more property taxes. So there's a lot to be said about this from an economic standpoint, from a community standpoint, from a quality of life standpoint. And so, the power of this and what it could be for historic neighborhoods in Lubbock, as well as central Lubbock, which is also struggling, is enormous in scope. And the challenges that it has been to get those things acknowledged, to be able to elevate this dialogue around this, and to have the designated committee that is supposed to be providing oversight on this conversation. It has been such an uphill slog, considering the fact that there really is no opposition to these ideas. Developers would benefit from zoning reform because who's going to be developing, right? Who's going to be redeveloping when it comes to being able to find new uses for land? So there isn't some boogeyman out there that's saying to the council, no, this is evil. It's going to empower neighborhoods and make it so that, I don't even know what type of convoluted argument you could make. And that's why I think these things become such head scratchers. Is what is it that we are in opposition to? It's not to other people in Lubbock. It's not to the Developers Council, to the Lubbock Apartment Association, to the West Texas home builders. It's not to the construction industry that would benefit economically from this. It's not from the neighborhoods that would benefit from a quality of life standpoint from these things. And it just, you sort of reach a stage where you ask the question, why are we stuck?
Yeah. It is a great question, and I've kind of resolved to attempt in the best ways possible to try to get to the bottom of this. And at the end of the day, honestly, I'm just more after the result. And Kay Marie brings up a good thing here, and we can kind of end on this note. She says, "This seems like a good example of environmental racism, but I've not heard many discuss this as a social justice issue. I know Pope is not responsive to discussions about race, but what do you all think about approaching the topic from this perspective as well?" So this is not new to them, Kay Marie. We actually began the discussion this way because it is a matter of fact that this is also a social justice issue, because the reason why these industries were put next to the neighborhoods they were put to by law in an ordinance that was written and enacted here in the city, that you do not put these polluting sites next to quote unquote good neighborhoods. Yep. And an earlier ordinance had referred to folks who were quote unquote Negro or quote unquote 1/8 Negro blood, which was shorthand back in the day for Hispanic, that those folks were pollutants.
Right.
And that was a much earlier ordinance in the 20s, but you can see the thread between that and when these industrial sites were put in, and it says you don't put these next to good neighborhoods. So in the mind of a racist, clearly you put them next to these colored folks' neighborhoods. And so they do understand that history very well. And we have actually approached that not only from on this issue, but also on impact fees and others, by telling them that, look, we all know it's there in black and white that there were laws made on a racial line about these things. You're telling us now you don't feel that way. You're telling us now you're not racist and all of these things. Okay, great. That's great. So you should have no problem taking the steps. And that's how we've approached it from that perspective, not so much attacking them and maybe calling them racist, but we have been telling them, if you're not, if everything you're saying is correct, then you shouldn't have a problem with just taking the steps in that direction. And most folks might say, well, what does that do? Just taking a step. I'll tell you what it does. It shows intent of the city, of where they want to go next. It shows intent that they want to do the right thing moving forward. It also shows that the city is taking accountability, because as we know from when you're just in your own personal life, when you're trying to, raise your lot in life or however you want to call it, we understand that we have to look inward and acknowledge what it is that we're missing, right? We've got to go out and get those new skills. We've got to go and train, and we've got to go out and do interviews to get whatever job or whatever position or start the business or whatever the case may be. We understand that none of that can happen until you acknowledge, okay, look, I have these issues, right? That's where it starts. Same thing like kind of with addiction classes, right? It starts with you admitting that there's an issue. And so, you know, again, it would show that, and that would go such a long way in these older neighborhoods. Again, does it fix everything? No. But what we've seen time and time again, being from East and North Lubbock, as I was grown up and been in East Lubbock for decades of my life, the status quo has been East and North Lubbock ask for something, the city kindly extends their middle finger and sends them back home without listening to them or anything. And so again, just the simple act of saying, okay, we understand this is not okay, but you know, we can't fix it all right now with this council, but we can take this one step to show you that Lubbock wants to go and do something different. And they just won't even do that. And I've actually specifically, during the impact fee situation, I told every single city council member this, except for two, because I didn't have to tell those two. Chattis and Miss Sheila Patterson Harris know this stuff. I would be preaching to the choir. I told the others that this is an opportunity for you to take a step. Because again, like with the impact fee situation, if they would have put impact fees to 0 in East Lubbock, it would have done nothing adverse to developers whatsoever. They just refused to do it. And even that would have been a small sign. And I told them this, when you don't do these things, when you won't even take that first step to say, okay, look, we intend to do the right thing, then the communities have no choice but to look at you as untrustworthy and as acting in bad faith. And that's what I told them. I'm trying to create more of a connection and more of whatever trust can be constructed out of this mess between the communities of East and North Lubbock and the council. And they are making it extremely hard. And that's exactly what I told them face to face. You're making it extremely hard for me to go back and tell these people anything, because they just see more of the same. And so, as I have said before many times on this program and out in the world with folks, the recourse we are then left with, I will remind folks that there is an election cycle coming up. Yes, the governor is going to be coming up for election and all of that, and there's going to be some different national elections. What I mean is there is an election cycle in Lubbock, Texas coming up in May of 2022. And the mayor's seat, the seat for District 1, District 3, District 5, all of these are going to be up for election. And we know the track records of the council that's sitting here now. We know their responses. We know their apathy to hearing citizen input and all of that. We know that. And so we need to keep that front of mind when this cycle starts. We know of some candidates who are running. We don't know all of them, but there should be a good number of candidates to choose from. You know, from what we're hearing, maybe more than we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
So there are going to be some options. I implore everybody out there to really pay attention to this race, to decide which of those folks you think would move us in a better direction, and then to get out and vote, because that is now our recourse. And I guess the silver lining in all of this is that now we are, after all of this whole year of dealing with this, we are now coming up on another election cycle. And so if we miss this chance, that would be very unfortunate for the city. It would be very detrimental to the city. And we can go into that much deeper in another show, but it would be very detrimental to the city to continue doing things that we're doing. in the way that we are doing them. And so, as I've been telling folks, let's kindly send them home on this next election cycle. Thank you for your service. We kindly need you to go home. And so, yeah, that's my rant of the day, I guess. Nick, you got anything to add here?
Yeah, I think about where we are as a community, and the solutions for many of these challenges that we face are well within our means and are good policy. These are things that, if regardless of the political affiliation, what party you might hold, makes sense, because there are aspects of our history as well as best practices and policy that can come together and help us move forward in a more meaningful way. And I think one individual who is really leading a lot of this effort from a spiritual standpoint is Jim Beck. And he was somebody who started to point out, we're coming to the 100-year anniversary of the original segregation ordinance in the city of Lubbock. And if you've never seen the city of Lubbock's map, what it looked like when that ordinance was passed, you will understand immediately when you see it what it is that we're talking about, because you will see the creation of the Chapman Hill neighborhood as a tiny satellite with effectively one access component to the rest of the city. And that was the area where people of color in our community were supposed to live. And you start to see, once you have an understanding of that history and how it has developed over time, you can see decision after decision that has occurred within our community that has exacerbated, that has continued this process of oppression, and has created burdens, generational burdens on individuals who live, breathe, and grow up in our historic neighborhoods. And so when you put these pieces together and you think about, where can we be in 2 years? How much could we accomplish in that period in time? It's enormous. It is truly, truly enormous. And that to me is something that I wish more people in the city of Lubbock understood. We should not be in a state of hopelessness. The problems that we face are ones that, if we're honest and straightforward and we have meaningful debate about them, can be fixed. But the challenges that we seem to continuously run across is poor process, a lack of engagement, difficulties in accountability. And those are issues fundamental to a democratic system. The things that are the bread and butter of America and why this country is so great. We can't keep struggling in that way and expect citizens to not be apathetic anymore, to believe in the process of government. We live in a time where the trust in government is at all-time lows. It doesn't have to be that way here. There is a better way forward. And, I just wish that we could get there. I really do.
Yeah. Good way to end us off. And as usual, I will end the show by reminding everybody to join your neighborhood association. If you don't have a neighborhood association in your neighborhood, you can create one. You can follow us on Lubbock Compact on Facebook, or you can go to lubbockcompact.com to follow our work. You can also donate and volunteer over there. Please just continue to watch our channels. We will be updating everybody on this amortization process. Also want to leave some folks with some hope out there, because it is not over. Once the UDC is wrapped up, this can still be put into the UDC at any point in time by the council, whatever council that may be. And so again, if we can't get it done with this council here, it may take us a council or two, but we're not letting this one go, and you can bet on that. And so thanks everybody for joining us, and we will be right back here next Wednesday. See you later. Goodbye.